Hello, it's Pain Points, our weekly podcast for Mindtools members everywhere. We take on the tough stuff of working life in the company of top researchers, writers, and role models. Together, in every episode, we try to extract some of the pain from work and put a bit more positivity in its place by showing you ways to do and be better in your role, one pain point at a time. Now, today we've got something of an empathy update. Empathy has become such a big topic for us in the last few years, reflected by a surge in interest in empathy all around the world. The Mindtools report, The Empathy Problem, explored the latest research into the far-reaching impacts of empathy, and also the challenges to understand it properly and use empathy wisely. And now we've just published our brand new Mindtools Expert Skill Bite course called Getting Empathy Right, to guide you to do just that. What's more, I'm delighted to say that the expert behind it, the author of best-selling books on the topic, and the founder of the world's first empathy platform is with us on Pain Points today, and we've got a lot to talk to Mimi Nicklin about. The course, her latest book coming up this year, but also a fascinating new project called the Empathy Letters. Mimi has started sending letters out into the world and receiving some amazing replies. It's an experiment that is already achieving really powerful results. So let's find out what she's up to, how you can get involved, and how it fits into everything else that Mimi Nicklin is doing to spread empathy literally everywhere. This is Pain Points. What are the empathy letters? And coming Mimi Nicklin from a glamorous location somewhere in the Far East. Where are you today? It's lovely to talk to you. Nice to see you.
Thank you so much for having me back, Jonathan. I am in Malaysia, which is where I live. So I think it's probably infinitely warmer than where you are today.
Yes, I wish I was there. For so many reasons, it would be nice. We must connect one of these days because we talk a lot about connection. We've never actually met face to face, but the next best thing is to see on a screen. It's really nice to have that bit of sunshine from the Far East from Mimi Nicklin. And I feel quite exhausted just talking about all the stuff you're doing. I feel quite lucky to have taken you from it for a few minutes in your busy schedule. But it's good news to know that empathy is keeping you as busy as ever.
Oh, it is, Jonathan. And I loved listening to your introduction there and just thinking about the fact that empathy really is rising. Because not so long ago, people wouldn't have done an introduction that said, you know, we hear a lot about empathy, or we have an empathy report, or we're running an empathy course. So for me, simply being here and seeing businesses like yours, platforms like yours, elevating this conversation is such a positive sign for our world, really.
Empathy letters. Tell us about this experiment then to really test this growing interest in empathy and the need for connection through empathy. You started sending letters out.
I did, Jonathan, and I'd love to just tell you the very short backstory of this, and it revolves around my father, who was a man I adored, and who sadly passed away about a year ago. But in the aftermath of his death, one thing happened that really sort of changed my life, in that my mum found a letter from his father to his mother, so my grandparents, in World War II. And she sent it to me as a picture and said, look at this, look at this amazing handwritten letter from times gone by. And the reason this is important is that moment sort of, imprinted in my brain somehow. And at that time, I had been thinking about sending a newsletter. But I just couldn't bring myself to do it, Jonathan. There's nothing wrong with newsletters, but I just felt probably we didn't need another one.
Yeah.
And then I woke up one Friday a few weeks after this, and I thought to myself, well, what would happen if I just wrote letters to people? Not a newsletter, just a letter, a little bit like a pen pal of old. And so I did. So I went over to the CRM platform that I had stagnantly sitting there in the background, not sending newsletters. Yeah. And I sent my first, what I called empathy letter. And it really is a very candid, personal letter, just like a pen pal letter. And I sent one. How
did it feel sending that first one out, not really knowing what was going to happen next?
Do you know what? I had no expectations, Jonathan. So I wasn't, it's a really good question. I don't know how I felt. I think I felt very peaceful. Because writing is actually a very therapeutic act when you're just writing a letter. The art of letter writing is perhaps something we've lost. We don't get the opportunity to do it very often. Today we tend to write with a purpose. I'm writing an email, or I'm writing for a book, or I'm writing a press release.
Yes, it's true. And someone once said to me that he didn't ever really know what he thought about anything until he'd written something down about it. And I think that's really true. I often find just by journaling or just writing something, even if no one else ever sees it, because I've gone through that process of writing it, I know a bit more about what I think about it, what I feel about something.
It gathers your thoughts. And what I then found in the months that followed, it's not even been a year, this project. It's been about 9 months. What happened in those 9 months that followed, blew me away, really, because people started writing back from all over the world about all kinds of amazing things. And of course, unfortunately, we're not writing physical letters, we're writing on an email platform. So they're digital, which means they're not totally anonymous. They are trusting me with their letter.
Yes.
I can see their name. And yet, people from all over the world write to me in reply about their lives. And I have no idea where they come from often, how they found these letters. But 9 months later, we have over 10,000 people reading these letters,
Yes.
which is overwhelming, actually, in many ways, that 10,000 people have signed up to read letters from me.
Yes, and you've really tapped into something, haven't you? Because like you say, it's not that traditional writing something down on paper and sending it to somebody, but it's got elements of that. It's got elements of that thoughtfulness and just taking a moment out of time. And I'm going to get you to read some from them in a moment, but there's a real poetry to them as well, which I noticed, which I wonder if that also comes out from this process of calling it a letter and taking a moment to do it. And even if you know other people are going to read it, maybe because of that, because people can be anonymous, but know that there is a bit of an audience and you're going to see it and others will maybe get something from it, it's just elevating their writing a bit as well. So there's a real poetry that comes through.
There is, and I think, sometimes again, anonymously, I will share a piece of a letter with someone, like I will with you today. And people will say, wow, that was not a quick reply.
Yes.
People are really taking time out of their lives to write to me. Sometimes, we won't read those ones today, they're too long, but sometimes they're very long. And there are a handful of people that now write back regularly. Not every 2 weeks, but probably every 2 months. And they unpack the next part of their story. I don't write a long reply back because, of course, there's many of them, but I acknowledge every single one of them and say, I read it and thank you for sharing. And, I'll make a comment about something in a letter. I hope that gets better, or I wish you luck, or I'm thinking of you, or whatever it is,
Yes.
to create that recognition. Because I think, as you know, at Mindtools, we have a lot of very lonely people in the world. And I think what these letters are doing is creating very candid connection with many people that perhaps don't know where else they can share these thoughts.
Yes. And so it's that lovely empathy in action, just a different angle on it, a different process that you've been going through. And just tell us about the practice and that first one. What was your first letter about? Was it about anything in particular?
My first letter was asking people to write down 10 things that they loved about themselves. I had done that exercise recently for myself, and I thought, well, let me ask other people to do it.
Okay.
And they sent them back to me. So that I didn't expect.
A whole postbag of love and,
Yes,
positivity.
Dear Mimi,
Wow.
these are the 10 things I love about myself. And I said, well, isn't that wonderful?
That's got to be good for you to receive. When you think of all the horrible things you get in the email and the mail, all the bills and demands and things, to get all that love and positive thinking, that's fantastic. So that one had a bit of an activity to do. And then I see some of the others are a thought you had at that moment, or just a little reflection, something that you've gone through in that day.
Yes, they tend to be something I've seen and reflected on, or sometimes they're about somebody else, obviously anonymously, someone I met in an airport, or something I saw in a hospital or a business meeting, or,
Yes.
Obviously I specialise in empathy, so they tend to be about themes that are related to that: connection, loneliness, happiness, joy, optimism, patience, presence.
Yes.
I try to link them back to the things that I feel people are looking for. And I think people tell me they're very graceful in their tone, right? That's what people say back to me.
Yes.
And I think that's why they feel different. There's nothing corporate in there. There's nothing promotional in there. It is just a letter like like my granddad's letter from the war, I guess.
Yes, from one human to another. And then from that out to thousands of other humans. It's an amazing process that's going. So shall we hear a bit from one or two of them then? Maybe you could pick out a couple of examples that show us the sorts of things and the style that people use as well when they send letters back to you.
Yes, well, why don't I read a couple of the shorter ones? I picked out some. I don't know what parts of the world they come from, but I will use just first names because, of course, that doesn't give anything away.
Yeah.
So the first one here says, "Hi, Mimi. Reading your words felt like pausing in the middle of a storm just to notice a bird drinking from the rain. For me, growth has never been about more, but about meaning, about how deeply an idea can touch someone and how far a story can travel into someone else's heart. I believe growth is found in the quiet moments too, the ones that remind us of who we are when no one is measuring. Thank you for this gentle reminder. In empathy, Joseph."
That's so beautiful, isn't it? And like you say, such a gentle tone to it as well.
I know, isn't it beautiful? I mean, that phrase at the top there, you know, felt like pausing in the middle of a storm to notice a bird drinking from the rain. I mean, what a lovely thing to say. They're not all that poetic, but the next one is a little bit different. This one says, "Dear Mimi, thank you for this beautiful and moving letter. It arrived at just the right time, like a gentle reminder to pause and feel more deeply. Your words resonated with me, especially the idea of searching for what's next while missing what's actually right here. Loneliness and disconnection feel like the quiet companions to many of our lives, even when we're in crowded rooms. Thank you for holding up a mirror with such empathy and grace. I'm grateful to be part of this conversation, and I always look forward to your next letter. Warmly, Azam."
Oh, another beautiful one there. Isn't that interesting how it's, like we said, it's helping people really to think about what they're going through by writing it down and by thinking of how best to describe it. And you can see there's a sort of little penny drop moment in there as well. And quite a few of these that you shared with me where people are thinking, I think I understand now why I'm feeling like this. It's because of how I'm working, or it's because of what I'm going through. And so there's a real kind of little process that goes on in these that we then get to experience a bit because we can read the letter too.
Yes, absolutely. And it's always amazing what people, you know, the environment that people speak to me in, where they get that from. And as you said, sometimes they're very poetic, sometimes they're sad, sometimes, you know, they're different. But it is amazing.
Yeah. And it does feel like it's backing up the stuff that you're talking about day in, day out, about disconnection and what changes, how much things get better when people do have connections, but just also how like the world of work at the moment is quite a challenge for people when they're working remotely, or their team is spread out around the world, or they're sitting at home all the time. That loneliness of work seems to be coming through a lot of these letters.
They do reflect back to me the things I say, and not always the things I say in the letter that they're replying to, right. Which makes me realise, you know, that they are reading. And quite a few people tell me very definitively, please do not stop writing. You know, as if it's a reminder to me, you know, we're here, don't give up, please don't give up on me. Because I think in this day and age, resilience, consistency are very in-demand skills. And I think sometimes people feel somehow a little worried that I created something and that I'll stop doing it. And they feel a need to remind me not to.
Yeah, do you ever worry what you've started, thinking, goodness me, if this grows now, this little stone I was pushing has now become a boulder, and how on earth am I going to keep this going for years to come?
Yes, sometimes. I mean, I spoke to somebody at the United Nations recently and about extending these for women in India, and she said the same thing to me, Jonathan. She said, do be aware, Mimi, that once you start, you can't really stop.
You'll find a way. You always find a way to do it. Because I suppose the beauty of it isn't anything incredibly complicated. Like you said, you don't have to reply to everybody. There is something that's happening that's almost kind of magical here because people are having this chance to share, knowing that there's a connection, but they're not asking you to write back and solve their problems or to give them loads of detailed advice. They want to just make a connection. They want to share something and have that moment with you and with this growing group of people that feel the same way.
Yes, absolutely.
And it sounds like you're learning from them as well, because I'm sure there are lots of experts who put stuff out into the world and they get lovely messages back, but it just backs up what they're saying at best. It doesn't actually tell them new things, but it seems like you're picking up new things, and I guess then adding that into the next books you write and the next courses you do, because you're learning what it actually means to people and what's happening in their lives right now.
I think so, and I think one of the key life lessons that I learned in this whole journey so far is that when you listen first to people, they share back with you in a way that is totally different. People are constantly telling me amazing things. And for example, when I go to corporate events, and I work a lot in Asia and the Gulf, and I finish my speech, very corporate events. But when people come to talk to me, they so often say to me, "Can I bring you home to my parents?" And I say, "Yeah, of course, I'll come for dinner." And quite often I go, maybe not that trip, but maybe when I'm back in their country again. But that is something very different. In the corporate world, I ask any of your leaders, has anyone in your team or your client team ever invited you home to have dinner with their parents? There is something else happening here. It is about this person is seeing me, and I want them to also see the people I love and spend my time with. So that's why I say it's a bit of a promise, really. And I learn all the time. I learn about culture and about family and about fear in a way that is not heavy. I mean, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not even a coach. I don't do any of those pieces of work, but I learn from people every day.
You just need to clone yourself. I think that'll be the next step. And then it's going to rent a Mimi service, and then empathy everywhere. It takes it on a whole new level. I'm going to get you to choose one more bit in a second, just to give people another little flavour. I mean, we could read for hours, couldn't we? Because there are so many great letters, and each one has just a slightly different take on life, or a different bit of their life that they want to share. But I'll get you to share one more in a second. We should also talk about the book as well, because there's a new book coming out. We won't give away too much about it, but it is called The Connection Prescription.
Exactly, The Connection Prescription.
Which is a phrase I remember from our Skill Bite course.
There we go. Now you know where it came from. So yes, The Connection Prescription comes out on the 12th of May in New York. And that is, well, I guess that very British phrase to say it does what it says on the tin. It is about how do we create a prescription for our connection at large. And one of my goals is to reconnect 1 million people. So how do we do that? How do we reconnect in 3 key areas as leaders, in leadership, in the workplace, in our relationships, whether that's your husband, your wife, your mother, your daughter, and also in our health, because as we know, when you are connected, you have better well-being, better health, better immunity, all kinds of things. So the Connection Prescription is really about how do we create these prescriptions, these ways to approach life that drive more connection into all areas of our lives.
I hadn't twigged that, actually, that prescription bit about the health side of it. What a clever title that is. Yes, a different sort of health prescription. The Connection Prescription.
Exactly.
Yeah, so all these different layers to empathy, they're all building up now, aren't they? It's wonderful. I wonder what your dad would have thought. I mean, he must have been very proud of all the work that you did when he was there to see it. I wonder how you'd have felt now, seeing how the letters, the family letters as well, have played a big part in this.
Well, he was a writer himself, not a formal one. He never published a book. He should have. But he was a writer and had a great way with words, which is probably where I get it from. And I do know that he was very proud, because one of his proudest moments of his life was he grew up from a very poor background in East London and turned his life around and his career from scratch and built businesses. And he was very proud of that. He was very proud that he built his own empire. And I think he was very proud that in my own way, I'm doing the same, all alone. This has been a passion of mine. It's my purpose, and it's growing really beautifully. We reached, Jonathan, 5 million people last year with this content, but we started with about 300 connections on LinkedIn. Yep. So yeah, I think he would be proud, that's for sure. And
it just comes through in the way you talk as well, just how much it means to you that it has that family element to it. And this is very much it always has been for you, hasn't it? This personal crusade, really. But it's lovely to hear the family background and all the other humans that are joining this band of empathizers around the world.
Including you, Jonathan. You
got me in there as well now. Yeah. And the whole Mindtools family, we're all on board. So shall we finish with one more bit from one of the letters, just to remind people of the sort of things that you're getting in your postbag?
Yes, let's do this short one about leaving the corporate world and how that feels, because I think it's probably very, relevant. This lady says, Mimi, I resonated so much with what you said today about being alone as an entrepreneur. Working for yourself sounds great. No office drama, no pointless meetings. But then no one warns you about the silence. No brainstorms, no quick, great job done. Just you and the fridge. I left corporate life to escape the empathy deficit, only to find loneliness waiting for me. Thank you for sharing that it doesn't always have to be this way. Here's to more connection for all of us. Don't stop writing, because I am reading. Dima.
Well, thank you, Dima, and thank you, Mimi, for reading Dima's letter there. And it just makes me feel like each of these letters, each of these people could be a million people. They're so representative of what's going on around the world.
Yes, yeah, and it's sometimes hard for me to read them. And even that one, my voice goes a little bit because, I feel for Dima, just her in the fridge.
Yeah, well,
I can imagine her life. I know what it's like.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm sure that has helped her and so many people listening to it. And it is this wonderful project that is now building up such momentum. And it's been really great hearing about it. For people listening now thinking, I want to get involved in this, I want to get the letters, maybe send a letter back, what should they do?
They can go to www.empathyletters.com.
Great.
That will allow them to sign up and join the letters. They can send me a letter too. Please send me a letter.
Yeah, we'll put a link to that in our show notes as well. And also, of course, a link to this wonderful new Mindtools Expert Skill Bite, Getting Empathy Right. It's available at mindtools.com, or however you log into Mindtools, or just go in via the link in our notes today. 7 weekly sessions led by Mimi with exercises to embed your learning, and crucially, a challenge every week to try out one of Mimi's strategies and reflect on what happened. So stop just nodding along to all this good stuff about empathy, take the course and start doing it from today. As you heard, Mimi's next book is called The Connection Prescription and it's out in May. So look out for that and we will remind you about it nearer the time as well. And right now you can get involved in the Empathy Letters project that we've been talking about. There's a link to it in the show notes. You can start receiving and maybe even replying to Mimi's letters. I'd better let you go now. This campaign to enfold the world in empathy won't hang around, and you've got so much going on, but it's been really good catching up with you. I'm sure we will speak again when the book appears, if not before. I'll meet you back here when that happens.
I can't wait.
But for now, from Mimi Nicklin and this week's Pain Points podcast, it's goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me and for helping me spread empathy everywhere. I really appreciate it.